Prabhupada ki jai, Satakoti Vaishnavanda ki jai. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So, welcome to our Guru Purnima special. The most auspicious day of our Vedic calendar is approaching, and so thought it would be appropriate. This is something we've been wanting to do for some time, and that is discuss the most glorious Siksastakam prayers. So, in spirit of Gauranga Mahaprabhu's appearance, we'll discuss over 3 days, the wonderful prayers of the Siksastakam. So today we'll cover an introduction to the Siksastakam, and we'll cover the first 2 verses. That is at least the plan. We'll see what Krishna arranges. And then likely tomorrow we'll cover verses 3, 4, and 5. And then Saturday we'll cover verses 6, 7, and 8. And in that way we'll cover all 8 and prepare us for upcoming Gaura Purnima, which is on Thursday. As I mentioned, the most auspicious day of our Vedic calendar, which I think we'll see why as we come up. So we'll read one verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita. But before we do that, question. So, how many of you are chanting Siksastakam prayers every day? Okay, a few. So, my hope is that by the end of this seminar, in less than 72 hours, will be the beginning of your journey of chanting the Siksastakam prayers every day. And I think you'll see the great importance of them and why Srila Prabhupada established this as one of the most important prayers that we chant daily. So sometimes when we understand the why behind it, then the inspiration to do becomes much easier. So we're going to go into detail, but we'll see that this is very important. So if you can get out from your phones. This is the time to use your phones, only time. And you can bring up the Siksastakam prayers. We'll start by reciting these prayers. We'll do this each day as a way to invoke auspiciousness on this wonderful journey we're about to take. And also let me know when you all have it. It's in the, what's that? Everybody has it? Loading? Okay, I'll give everybody a second. I was going to bring printouts, but I did not. So. You all have it? Got it? Everybody has it? Okay, so we'll just chant it together. And you all can, we can chant it, okay? Cheto Darpanamarjanam Bhavamahadavagnirvapanam Shreyaya Kairava Chandrika Vitaranam Vidyavadu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pratipadam Purnamrita Swadanam Sarvanasafanam Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Avudani Sarva Shaktis Tatrapita Niyamita Smarane Nakalaha Ekadasita Pratupa Bhagavanamati Durgaiva Midrasham Mahajanina Anuragaha Turnadati Sunichena Tarorapi Sahishnuna Amanina Mananena Kirtanya Satari Nadanam Nadanam Nasundarim Kavitam Vajagadishakamaye Mama Janmani Janmanishware Bhavata Bhaktirahitiki Ainanda Dhanuja Kinkaram Patitam Mam Vishame Bhavam Buddhau Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja Sita Guli Sadrasham Vichintaya Nayanam Galarashu Dharaya Vadanam Gagadaya Gira Bulakaye Vichitam Vapukara Tavamagane Bhavishyati Yugayatam Nimishena Chakshusha Prabhushayatam Shunyatam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Virahena Ashlisya Vapadaritam Panushtamam Avarshanam Matam Karotuva Yatha Tatava Virato Nampato Manapana Sakasudeva Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Jnanatirmirandasya Jnananjanasalakaya Chakshuramitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttaraparam Shri Guru Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunattam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vaevacha Patikanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna. So, we'll read this verse. You all can see that. This is coming from the 20th chapter of Antya Lila, verse number 65. So this is, the title is Siksastakam prayer. So we'll start with what is the benediction that we get by hearing and reciting these prayers. What is the great benediction? So this verse reads, Prabhura Siksastakam shloka ye padeshune Krishna preme bhakti tara bhara dine dine. Translation. If anyone recites or hears these 8 verses of instruction by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his ecstatic love and devotion for Krishna increases day by day. So we can see the great benediction that we get. And that's why Srila Prabhupada emphasized such importance to this chanting of the Siksastakam prayers. Everything he did was very meticulously designed to help us overcome this material illusory energy and to achieve this highest benediction of love of Krishna. And that is why in every ISKCON temple around the world, immediately after Mangalarti and Tulasi Puja, just prior to Japa, these 8 prayers are chanted aloud in unison. All devotees will gather and chant the Siksastakam prayers. And it is a great process that we should carry forward in our daily approach to Japa. And we'll see by understanding the purports of these verses why they're very powerful for us to begin our Japa with the recitation of the Siksastakam prayers, and why Srila Prabhupada established this for us as a wonderful daily routine. Because as Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, that if anyone hears or recites these 8 verses, ecstatic love and devotion of Krishna. Right? So, Nitya Krishna, this is not showing up, you can see. So, a little bit of introduction to the verses. So, Shiksha means instructions, and Ashtaka means 8. Right? So these are 8 instructions coming from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So a little bit of background or refresher for all of us. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to teach us the mood and process of bhakti. Krishna himself was thinking and feeling that I spoke how to practice bhakti during Krishna Lila, but I did not show. And so Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami tells us in Adi Lila that the external reason for coming was to teach the process of bhakti. So he did this in many wonderful ways, and he stayed on earth for 48 years in this way. And he split his pastimes into 2 sections. The first 24 years, he stayed in Navadvip, where after early years of performing his very childhood pastimes, he began his scholarly pastimes. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. And then began and inaugurated this Harinam Sankirtana movement. Lord Nityananda came from Vrindavan to reunite with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Navadvip. And there they inaugurated the Sankirtana movement, the chanting of the holy names in wide form. And then after 24 years passing, he then took sannyas for the purpose, the singular purpose of being able to preach the process of bhakti, of devotion. And for the ensuing 6 years, he resided in Jagannath Puri and also traveled all throughout India, including all of southern India, all the central regions, and then also to Sri Vrindavan Dham. And there, all along the way, he was preaching the holy names of the Lord. But his method of preaching was primarily focused on chanting of the holy names, Harinam Sankirtan. when he got into philosophy, the philosophy he was discussing, that was more reserved to some of the intimate associates or the nearby associates, and they primarily would focus on, discussing the pastimes of Srimad Bhagavatam, reading Srimad Bhagavatam and whatnot. And with his very intimate associates, some other inner moods of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were revealed. But this process was formed, and he engaged primarily the 6 Goswamis in writing about everything that he was preaching. So he instructed Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami specifically extensively on the process of devotional service, and asked them to write voluminous books. So much has been written about the process of devotional service by Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, Jiva Goswami, and others. And this was under the instruction and guidance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this was the principal way in which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was teaching. Now, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left us 8 verses. Now, we should remember that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was an extraordinary scholar. In his early days, he was very famous in his youth. He was just a young boy, and he had defeated the great Keshav Kashmiri, who was a great Pandit, who had traveled all over India and was defeating scholars everywhere. And whenever other scholars would see him coming, they would run because they did not want to be embarrassed in defeat of him. And Keshav Kashmiri was blessed by Goddess Saraswati herself, who was residing on his tongue and would be speaking through him. So you can see how empowered he was as a scholar. So when Keshav Kashmiri met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on the banks of the Ganga, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was teaching Sanskrit grammar to the boys in the school, they engaged in a debate. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took a very humble position, thinking, I am not qualified to speak with you. But Keshav, if you want to speak something, then I would be happy to hear. And so Keshav Kashmiri immediately began to recite many, many verses on the glories of the Ganga in the same rhythm and meter as the river was flowing, just off the top of head. Wonderful prayers. And at the end, Keshav Kashmiri asked, so what did you think? Chaitanya said, that was nice, but there were some mistakes. He said, what? And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu picked one specific verse and pointed out some mistakes. I won't go into the details, but pointed out some mistakes grammatically. And Keshav Kashmiri was stunned. Nobody has ever been able to defeat him, yet let alone find a mistake in his composition. And then, Keshav Kashmiri was defeated, humbled. That night he went home lamenting, and was lamenting to Goddess Saraswati, how you let me down. You were supposed to be with me at all times. And I was defeated by this Nimai Pandit. And Goddess Saraswati came to his dream and said, you were defeated by my master. What I can do in the presence of my own master, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So don't lament. And then Keshav Kashmiri understood who he was debating with. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was an extraordinary scholar. We know when he met Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya in Jagannath Puri. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was a great Vedantist. And he sat Chaitanya Mahaprabhu down and explained Vedanta for days on end. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu just sat silent. And after many days of speaking, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, are you hearing? Are you understanding anything? He says, I understand Vedanta. I don't understand what you're speaking. Because you're completely convoluted. And then he began to set Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya on the right track. So he was able to change the consciousness of a very, well-studied scholar like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. We know the sannyasis at Varanasi, the great Vedantists there also, were completely converted. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was an extraordinary scholar. But he left us only 8 verses. So we should understand and think then, if this great scholar who is of course non-different than the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, who came to give us the process of bhakti, how to achieve the highest perfection of life, then what must be included in these 8 verses? Something extraordinary. Otherwise he would have given 10, 12, maybe 100. But actually in these 8 verses, they are so perfect. They contain the complete essence of all instructions. Everything that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to teach is contained within these 8 verses. So who would like to memorize these 8 verses and recite them now? Because they contain everything. Everything that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to teach. So these verses are presented by Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in the 20th chapter of the Antya Leela of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Now, we know that Chaitanya Charitamrita is quite a large composition, and it's not as much a narration of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes as it is about his teachings. The pastimes are discussed, but heavier emphasis is placed on the different instructions and teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which makes it really the treasure grove of our philosophy. You know, we read Bhagavad Gita, and then we say like the graduate study is Chaitanya Srimad Bhagavatam, and the postgraduate study is Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's like the ultimate of all knowledge. And in this postgraduate study compilation of Chaitanya Charitamrita, what is the final word? What is the final chapter that Srila Krishna Kaviraj Goswami decides to present? The Sri Siksastakam prayers. So the 20th chapter, the final chapter of this Chaitanya Charitamrita is labeled the Siksastaka prayers. So Krishna Kaviraj Goswami wants to end on this sort of very important note of the culmination of everything that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to teach. So we glean by this its great importance in this. So just a little bit of context for the verses. They are not necessarily, they were a composition of verses Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave at different times. And Srila Rupa Goswami has compiled these verses in his book Padyavali, which is a book of prayers. And so they are not verses necessarily that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spoke in sequence, but he spoke at different times. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami has brought them together in this 20th chapter of Chaitanya Charitamrita. And we'll see how these 8 verses are very systematically connected to each other. And they present a progression of consciousness from the very beginning stages of bhakti to the ultimate of perfection. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a couple of slides. But it is a progression from beginning to end. But we should understand how they kind of came to be. And in the beginning of this chapter, Krishna Kaviraj Goswami explains, I won't read some of the verses, but he's explaining how these verses were discussed by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, not in big assemblies, in big pandal programs, but in a very intimate association. Not even of his close association, but his very intimate, specifically with Swarup Damodar and Ramananda Rai. With these 2 personalities, he would recite some of these verses, and they would relish them in ecstasy. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would present a verse, and then present some commentary on it, and they would go into this ecstatic mood. And so these verses actually reflect the very inner chamber of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's heart, his very innermost mood. And that mood again was to help all of us learn the process of bhakti, and also his own desire to experience the supreme taste of bhakti. So these verses were very intimately discussed, and by the mercy of Krishna Kaviraj Goswami and Srila Rupa Goswami, now they're very broadly relished by all of us, and hopefully by more of us, as we come to learn the great importance of the Siksastakam prayers. Okay? So the commentary on Siksastakam prayers is extraordinary and elaborate. And so we'll focus on the commentaries by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his Sanvadan Bhashya. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur has also commented on it. And of course, Srila Prabhupada has given much commentary on the Siksastakam prayers. So the purports and discussion that we'll have during the summer will be primarily composed from these three sources. Okay? So let us establish a quick set of terminology that will help us understand the structure of the Siksastakam prayers and how they flow and how they connect, which is on the very next slide, I promise. But I wanted to establish a couple of terms just to get everybody on the same page, and then we'll discuss that flow. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught gave us this aspect, and Srila Rupa Goswami teaches us the nectar of devotion based on the teachings from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This progression of bhakti. So pure devotional service, it begins in the platform of sadhana bhakti, which is bhakti in the practice. Practice means we are aspiring for perfection. We practice something to get great at it. So sadhana is the practice of bhakti for the goal of awakening perfection. And Rupa Goswami gives us the very potent verse in Nectar of Devotion that by the practice of sadhana, one can awaken this dormant love of Krishna. So from the maturing state of sadhana bhakti also is broken up into two subdivisions, Vaidhi Bhakti and Raganuga Bhakti. We won't get into those details today, but understand that it is the beginning stage. And the goal of sadhana bhakti is to awaken Bhava Bhakti. And Bhava Bhakti is like the budding stage, the preliminary stage of Prema Bhakti. Like a flower, when it is budded, it is just prior to it blooming. So that is like Bhava Bhakti. It is devotional service in ecstasy, and then Krishna Prema, the ultimate perfection of life that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will show to us. And this is pure love of God. So this is the progression of our practice of devotional service. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught us this sort of three-step process to perfection. So he established this concept of Sambandha Gyan, Abhideya Gyan, and Prayojana. So you may have heard these terms before, but just to understand this. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu teaches us that Sambandha Gyan, it means understanding our relationship with Krishna. When we understand our relationship, then we act in that relationship. That is Abhideya. By acting in that relationship, we then achieve the result of that relationship, which is love of God. Krishna Prema. That is Prema. Just like if we go to some family reunion and we meet somebody and realize, oh, this is my cousin. I've never met before. So now I've come to know this relationship. Right? Some Sambandha Gyan has been acquired. I become aware of this relationship. So what do? We never talk to each other again? Oh, we talk and catch up. We begin to act in that relationship of family. Right? So we begin to discuss, and a relationship builds. We are understanding that relationship. And what is the result from that acting in relationship? A bond. A sense of unity, happiness from this relationship. So in that material context, we can try to understand that when we realize our sambandha with Krishna, what is our sambandha? We are his eternal servants. We are his part and parcel. So if I know I'm his part and parcel, his eternal servant, then the only logical conclusion is to render devotional service. That is Abhideya. That is the conclusion from Sambandha Gyan, is to act in that relationship. And by rendering devotional service, what is the result? Krishna Prema, love of Krishna. Supreme ecstasy and happiness in love of Krishna. That is their prayojana. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so simple. Know the relationship, act in it, get the result. So these verses of Siksastakam also follow, taking us from Sambandha Gyan to Abhideya to Prayojana. And also from Sadhana Bhakti to Bhava Bhakti to Prema Bhakti. So we'll explain how. Finally, we know that there are the 9 steps to Krishna Prema. From faith to association in sadhu sangha, to acting in the performing the different practices of devotional service, bhajana kriya, to purifying the heart, anartha nivritti, becoming fixed, nishta, acquiring the taste of the holy names, ruchi, this attachment, ashakti, finally bhava and prema. So there's 9 steps. So these verses also follow those 9 steps. So very beautifully composed with such exquisite detail. So let us see now and discuss a little bit about the flow. And what we'll see is in all of this, the constant is the emphasis on chanting. What is the singular topic of the 8 prayers of Siksastakam? Chanting of the holy names. It is the supreme perfection. And we're going to see in exacting detail why and how it is a perfection. So this is the eternal state, actually. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is making a very emphatic point that chanting, it is the eternal process. It is the process in sadhana bhakti to purify the heart, to remove the contaminations, to remove the anarthas. And it is the process that is performed when one has achieved and awakened Krishna prema, love of God. It is both the means and the end. In the spiritual world, we chant the holy names of the Lord. In the material world, in the purifying approach, we chant the holy names of the Lord. It is an eternal process because it is the most potent and eternal occupation of the spirit soul. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is establishing that in these prayers. So that's a little bit small, but we'll just discuss this a little bit in detail now. What the verses do in the flow, how they're all connected, and then we're going to go verse by verse. So again, today we'll cover verses 1 and 2, and then we'll continue in the remaining verses. But I just wanted to connect all the verses in a quick summary, and then show how this Sambandha Gyan, Abhideya Gyan, Prayojana Gyan flow with the 8 verses, and also the Sadhana Bhakti, Bhava Bhakti, Prema Bhakti. Okay? So the first verse, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is establishing the glories of Sankirtana. And he's giving 7 very powerful perfections of the process of chanting. So this is established in the first verse. In the second verse, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then establishes Krishna's names are all potent. They are non-different from him. But he is so unfortunate that he has no attraction for them. So showing the great importance of knowing what it is that we should actually pray for in his attraction to the holy names. From there, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then says, okay, how to develop the attraction. How to do Kirtaniya Sadahari. How to always chant the holy names, Lord. We'll always chant only when we have attraction to them. How to get attraction to them? He says, one must be humble, tolerant, offer all respects to others, and expect none in return. 4 steps. So he gives the 4-part formula. How to develop and awaken this attraction. And when one is attracted to the holy names, they have no other attractions. No material desires. Not even liberation. He's going to say, birth after birth, just give me the opportunity to chant. Janmani Janmani Shari. We'll see that in the verse. And what is then the desire if I have no material desires? Janmani says, well, just make me your servant. Place me as a dust at your lotus feet. That is my prayer. This is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's praying. And from there, then, the moods of ecstasy. When am I going to feel the tears flowing from my eyes? These ecstatic symptoms of bhakti, chanting. When is that going to happen? And when it happens, wow. A moment feels like 12 years or more. This is discussed in the 7th verse. A moment I cannot chant is like 12 years or more. That much attachment there is to the holy names. This is described in 7th verse. And in the final verse, the perfection of all consciousness. This unconditional love. Unconditional. Even if you make me brokenhearted by not being present before me, or you handle me roughly, I don't care. You are still the supreme object of my love. That is unconditional love. Not, I'll love you if you answer my prayers. I'll love you if you do X, Y, or Z. And who is the epitome of unconditional love? The personification of this perfected mood of Krishna Prema? And we'll read on Saturday some beautiful verses that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives to explain this 8th verse of unconditional love. So you can see, going from understanding what the holy names are in the first verse, having no attraction to them, to beginning to practice the moods to be able to chant constantly, all the way up to the ultimate mood of unconditional love. This is how the Siksastakam prayers bring us from the beginning platform to the highest of all perfection. And this is why they're so potent for us to study. So the first 5 verses cover the process of sadhana bhakti. So we'll discuss them in that context. Verse 6 is purely in Bhava Bhakti, and 7 transitions from Bhava Bhakti to Prema Bhakti. And verse 7 and 8 are into Prema Bhakti. Verse 8 being the matured, perfected Mahabhav state of Krishna Prema. So this is how the verses are organized, again, according to the commentary of our acharyas, in how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was established. In terms of this Sambandha Gyan, so the first 5 to the 5th verse saying, I am Krishna's servant. That is the ultimate conclusion of Sambandha Gyan. This is presented through the first 5 verses. And the result is the ecstatic mood and the unconditional love. That is the prayoja. Okay? And actually Acharyas and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that all 8 verses are Abhideya. Because what is the instruction in all 8 verses? Chant the holy names of the Lord. And that is the primary Abhideya, primary process that we can uncover. By knowing our relationship, the only conclusion is chant, chant, chant. That is the process. So all 8 are considered within Abhideya. So this is the little bit of the flow and the structure of the Siksastakam prayers. Okay? So now we'll move into a discussion of verse 1, and I think we'll get to verse 2 with everyone's patience. So this is the verse that we recited, right? Cheto darpana marjanam baba mahada bhagni nibapanam shreya kaida vachandika vitaranam vidya badu jivanam anandam buddhi vardhanam patipadam punamrita swadanam sarvatma snapanam param vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. Now, most important, unless you are an expert in Sanskrit scholar, we must understand and read the translations. Because what are we chanting? So if you're going to memorize one thing, memorize the translation first. Now, that may sound unconventional, but we must bring the purport into our heart. But I hope we'll learn both, because it's very sweet to chant these prayers. So recite this. Glory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtana movement, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life, of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtana movement is a prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction mood. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss, and it enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. So now, we're going to break down each and every one of these in detail. Okay, so each of the 7. So these are the 7 perfections of chanting the holy names of the Lord. And that's why it is Param Vijayate, the greatest victory. And so this verse starts, all glories to Sankirtana. All glories. And it's because of these 7 perfections that are awarded. So we may want to know, what am I going to get if I wake up early in the morning and chant the holy names of the Lord? You know, this, what is it? And what's in it? What is the potency of it? So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the very opening verse is going to give us the 7 perfections of chanting the holy names. Actually, the whole seminar could start and end just on this first verse, these 7 potencies. Because if we have faith in this, everything else will manifest on its own. So let us discuss now. So the first is this Cheto Darpana Marjana. Okay, so the first step. So the chanting of the holy names cleanses. Marjana. Marjana means to cleanse. Right? The mirror of the heart. Mirror is Darpana. And the heart is the Chetas. So the start of our problems is our identification, I am this body. That is the start of our problems. All of them. Not today's problems, not tomorrow's problems, but since the beginning of time. And what is the end to all of our problems? Realizing I am not this body. Having clear vision of who I am. The false ego is the beginning of our problems. What false ego means? False vision. I don't see who I am. And that is in the end of it. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu uses this great metaphor, the mirror of the heart, in our Acharya's comment, that the mirror, in order to see our face, we need a mirror. But if there is some dust on the mirror, then we cannot see our face very clearly. But if there's like 1 foot thick dust, we can't even see the mirror itself. We don't even know that there's some reflective potency behind all this dust, right? So we cannot see ourselves. But we know if we clean the mirror, then we can see ourselves. And to the extent we have cleansed, to that level we get clarity in seeing our reflection. Is it not? Yeah. That is how a mirror works. So, why don't we see ourselves as spirit soul? We say, I'm not this body. Yeah, we've heard that since the beginning of our spiritual journey, but still daily we are entrapped by the bodily consciousness. Why we don't see it? Just as why we don't see ourselves in a dirty mirror. Because there's some dust on it. There is the impurities in the heart. And how those impurities came into the heart? By the interaction with the modes of material nature. As we interact with the material world, we acquire so many impurities. And how much dust we have? 1 inch, 2 inches, 1 foot, 1 mile? But we know that we have been acquiring dust for millions of lifetimes. Millions of lifetimes we have acquired this dust in the heart. And what that dust in the heart is doing, it is preventing us from seeing, who am I? Sambandha. That I am eternal servant of Krishna. Instead I see I, me, and mine. And I try to give happiness to this body. And what happens? 100% of the time in the end? Misery. Frustration. And this has been going on for millions of lifetimes. So, what do we need to do? To see ourselves in the mirror, we have to cleanse it. So am I going to put some soap on the heart and it'll cleanse? Do some angioplasty and cleanse the heart? Flush the arteries? It's done? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, no. Cheto Darpana Marjanam. When you chant Sankirtan, what happens? The mirror of the heart is cleansed. We remove all of this dust that has been accumulated for years and years. It is the powerful cleansing agent. And it cleanses the heart. And when we cleanse the heart, what happens? We can see now, who am I? I am not this body. We see ourselves as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. And this is one of the supreme perfections of chanting the holy names of the Lord. Because when we see ourselves as eternal servants of the Lord, then what happens? Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma Nashotari Nakamshati. One becomes fully joyful. No more lamenting, no more hankering. Once I see who I am. So to cleanse this heart, it is through the process of chanting. Now you may say, well, I've been chanting 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Still I'm seeing body. How powerful is this chanting? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. Where's the Marjanam? We should know. How many years we have put dust into the heart? So millions and millions of lifetimes. So continue the sadhana process. Keep chanting. Keep chanting. Keep chanting. And that heart will get cleansed. Because this is the perfection of the Sankirtana process. Cheto Darpana Marjanam. But there's more. Bhava Mahadava Nirnivapanam. Chanting the holy name, what it does? It extinguishes the fire of material life. material life so blissful? How many of us find 24 hours of bliss and happiness in the day? How many of us find 24 hours of pure bliss and happiness in a week? In a month? Maybe in a year? So much dukkha. So much pain and struggling. Yet what we are trying to do, make a comfortable place. It's as foolish as someone live in the midst of a giant forest fire trying to make a comfortable living. What do we do if we're trapped in a forest fire? What do we want? To get out. And how anxiously and eager we want to get out? Tomorrow or the next day?
Next second.
Next second. Immediately. We want relief from the fire of material. So this chanting process, it extinguishes the fire of conditional life. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is using another metaphor here. First metaphor, mirror of the heart. Second, this material life, it is like a blazing fire. Mahadavagni. Not a small fire. Not a campfire to keep us warm. But a giant forest fire raging. This is material life. This is what it. And how to put it out? To put out a forest fire, is it easy? You just hook up one hose and spray? It takes a torrential downpour of rain. The only way to truly extinguish a forest fire. So what is that torrential downpour of rain on the forest fire of our existence in the material world? Chanting. The mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when we chant the holy names of the Lord extinguishes this fire of conditional life. This is the second perfection of chanting the holy names of the Lord. So amazing. Due to Maya, we think, no, I'll get comfortable tomorrow in this forest fire. Tomorrow I'll find all my happiness. Not going to. Third perfection, Shreya Kairava Chandrika Vitaranam. Chanting of the holy names, it is the prime benediction. Why? Because it spreads the soothing rays of the moon. So, some things to break down. What is prime benediction? Means the best benediction one can get. Actually, we don't know what to pray for. The Siksastakam prayer is going to teach us what to pray for. And what is the greatest thing that the living entity can acquire? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tells us. Billions of dollars, world fame, power. The greatest thing we can do is awaken our Krishna prema. That is the greatest achievement of the living entity, of the jiva, is to awaken our love of Krishna. This prime benediction, it is achieved through chanting. One doesn't need to go through intense austerities, arduous study of Shastra, live in the cave, no. By this process of chanting, which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explained in the next verse, where there are no hard and fast rules, one can achieve the greatest of benediction of humanity. That is Krishna prema. And it is the benediction of all humanity. It is universal. Not to some, to select few, but it is universal. Why? Because every living entity is also part and parcel of the same Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna. We all have the same sambandha. And thus the abhideya is also the same. As is the prayojana, the goal. So this is the universal, topmost benediction one can get. And how it is achieved? By the chanting of the holy names. The soothing rays of the moon. Another great metaphor. So the example of the moon is used here. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives the explanation that the soothing rays of the moon is what blossoms the white lotuses, the very pristine, beautiful white lotuses. It says, what is the white lotus in our process of bhakti? It is the Krishna prema. What is going to bloom the Krishna prema that is lying dormant already in our heart? It is the soothing rays of the chanting of the holy names. The holy names are so powerful that they bring about the blossoming of this Krishna prema in our heart. And this is the third benediction of chanting of the holy names. And again, it's an eternal process. Not just once to purify the heart, but when it is purified, it is also the source of all happiness. What is Mother Yashoda doing constantly? Chanting the glories of Krishna. What are the cowherd boys doing constantly? Chanting the glories of Krishna. This is the eternal process and the purifying process. So this cooling moon, and we know the moon is also very soothing. Srila Prabhupada gives the example of the waxing moon. Each day it's getting bigger and bigger as we go from new moon to full moon. Like that, the soothing rays are very cooling. The challenge of living in the forest fire of material existence is subsided by the cooling effect of the chanting of the holy names. So this is the third great benediction or perfection. Fourth, Vidya Vadu Jivanam. This chanting of holy names, it is the life of all transcendental knowledge or wisdom. Life meanings, it is the conclusion. You know, we always want to know, okay, of all the things, all the Shastra, all Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhagavad Gita, the Vedas, Upanishads, what is the essence conclusion? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tells us. It is chanting. And what is his authority to make such a statement? He is the author of all Vedic knowledge. And so he's establishing that the life of all transcendental knowledge and wisdom is chanting of the holy name. Vidya Vadu Jivana. So this Krishna consciousness, this chanting of Hare Krishna, this Sankirtana Yajna, it is the epitome of all wisdom. It is the conclusion. Wisdom, when we acquire some wisdom, it leads us to some action, some conclusion. So Krishna gave Bhagavad Gita, and the conclusion that he gave to Arjuna was what? Sarva dharma pritya. You surrender unto me. Ma may come. Surrender everything under me. And the conclusion of surrendering to Krishna is devotional service. Rendering devotional. Manmana bhakto. Become my devotee, Krishna said. And what is the conclusion of becoming Krishna's devotee? Chanting of the holy names. Chanting of the holy names. Chanting of the holy names. And that's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would go repeatedly chant Harinam, 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 Eva Kevalam Kalo Nashteva 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 Gatine. There is no other way, there is no other way. This is the life, the conclusion of all knowledge. Just because we get it, maybe in the first session we ever went to, don't underestimate its potency. Count our blessings that we are given the conclusion in the beginning. It is the greatest blessing. And that is what Srila Prabhupada gave to us, following in the footsteps of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He went village to village in India, even into the forests, spreading this life of all knowledge. So this is the fourth perfection. Fifth perfection, Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam. The chanting of the holy names. It brings into the heart an ever-increasing ocean of bliss. It increases the ocean of bliss. In the material world, we are always trying to get some happiness. You know, we work 5 days a week in the office to try to enjoy a couple days on the weekend, and it always fails with different responsibilities, this, that, and the other. Right? We are working so hard trying to get bliss. And we know, whatever it is that we finally get after so much effort, how long do we enjoy it? We enjoy it, and in time, it dissipates. To the point where we even forget it. We don't even know what it is. We lose it. Right? So everything that gives us happiness in the material world, it fades very, very quickly. And we have to work so hard to get it in the first place. What kind of bargain is that? But this chanting of the holy names. What it does, it actually releases an ocean of bliss. Not only an ocean, but an ever-increasing ocean. Whatever happiness I may taste in chanting today, tomorrow, it will be even higher. And the next day, even more. And when it will end, when will you get to the peak of happiness of chanting? Never. Because it's always increasing. It's always expanding. That is the perfection of chanting the holy names. It is always getting sweeter and sweeter as we cleanse the mirror of the heart. And when it's fully cleansed, still in the residents of Vrindavan every day are having more and more happiness with Krishna. I think when is it ever going to level off? No, it is a anandam buddhivardhanam, ever increasing ocean. An ocean, we see an ocean, but we struggle to understand its vastness. When do we realize how vast the ocean is? When we lose something in it. Right? One ship is lost in the ocean, and people are searching and radar and sonar and diving ship, all this, and many I never found. Then we realize how vast the ocean is. If you take one stone and throw it in the ocean, what is the chance you'll find it? Right? That is the fact. And this is a material ocean, which is limited. This is how much bliss is there. And how much bliss is in the material world? Rupa Goswami tells us nectar devotion. All the happiness of the material world, even up to the point of merging into the Brahma Jyotir. All of that combined is the amount of water that would accumulate in the hoof print, not of a cow, but of a calf. When a calf makes an indentation in the road, when it walks, and it makes a little hole, and when it rains, it fills. How much water is there? Now if you put a stone in there, can you find it? Just to give us some context. So this chanting unleashes this ocean of never-ending bliss. And the beauty is, it never ends. We get the opportunity to be drowned in an ocean of pleasure that never, ever ends. Always gets sweeter and sweeter and sweeter. Exact opposite. And then what happens? Pratipadam. Step by step. Purnamrita swadanam. Swadanam, we get to taste the nectar, the sweetness of the holy names. So this chanting process, we may not have yet acquired the taste, but keep chanting, because then it will release this nectar of bliss. So the chanting process is what allows us to enjoy this sweetness of the process. Then we'll actually be able to taste it. And we'll become anxious for it. When you have something very palatable, what happens? We want more of it. But again, materially, what happens when we get more of it? Eventually, but this nectar of the holy names, when we taste it once, we become addicted to it, like a Shakti attached. And then Bhava and Prema comes. So this happens. How? By chanting of the holy names. We need more conviction. Okay. Sarvatma Snapanam. The final, seventh perfection. That it bathes the soul, cleansing it of all contamination. What it means is it brings one to the absolute highest position of selfless service. No personal desires. One becomes fully selfless in their service. In the beginning stages, we do our service still with some personal motive. Mm-hmm. But actually, by chanting of the holy names, we become cleansed of that even subtle personal desires. Anya bilashita shunyam, Rupa Goswami explains. Pure devotional service, free of all desires. This freedom of desires comes from the chanting of the holy names. And the personification again of perfect selfless service, Srimati Radha. And so Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that we, chanting the Siksastakam prayers, pray to become the maidservant of the maidservant of the maidservant of the maidservant of Srimati Radharani, so that we can follow in the footsteps of this selfless service. And so many wonderful pastimes are there of selfless service. We know Krishna's story of getting a headache. His headache was going to be cured only by the dust from the feet of his devotees. So to illustrate the great selfless mood of the gopis of Vrindavan, Krishna told Narada Muni, you go ask somebody for the dust of their feet so that it'll cure my headache. And so Narada Muni went to the great brahmanas. He said, no, if we give our dust of our feet, we'll go to hell. And like that, Narada Muni went everywhere searching. But nobody was foolish enough to give the dust of their feet to Krishna, knowing that is a great offense. So they went back to Krishna. Narada Muni said, no one was giving. He said, did you go to Vrindavan? Ask the gopis. He went to the gopis. Narada Muni said, Krishna has a headache. Krishna has a headache? How do we solve? He wants dust from the lotus feet of you. Before he could even finish the sentence, they started rubbing their feet, putting buckets and buckets of dust. He said, here. Narada Muni said, you're seriously ready to give? Don't you know? It's the greatest of offense. You will suffer in hell. And the gopis said, we are willing to suffer in hell for eternity if it brings a moment of relief to Krishna of his headache and discomfort. This is selfless service. How to achieve this mood? Sankirtan, chanting of the holy names. This is what results. And so these 7 potencies of the holy name, they make us Param Vijayate, supremely victorious over the material world. Anybody finds it hard to conquer Maya, the material energy, the modes of nature, our bodily consciousness? This is how to become not just victorious, but Param Vijayate, supremely victorious through the chanting of the name. Second verse, read it. Nam namakari bahuda nija sarva shakti tatrarpita niyamita smarnena kala etadasita prakapa bhagavan mahapi durdeva vijashta mahajani anuraga. O my Lord, your holy names alone can render all benedictions to living beings. And thus, you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all of your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these holy names. Right? Oh my Lord, out of kindness, enable us to easily approach you by your chanting your holy names. But I am so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. A very powerful verse. So here, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was already established. Sankirtan movement is a prime benediction. It is the only means. Only means, he said. We need to go back. He said, right? Your holy names alone can render some benedictions, a few benedictions, all benedictions, the prime benediction. Right? But what is our misfortune? No attraction for it. It gives us everything. But I don't want to chant. I don't want to chant. So, Nam Akari Bahuda. Krishna, you have unlimited transcendental names. How many names? Unlimited. Why unlimited? Because Krishna is unlimited. There are names for his name, forms, pastimes, qualities. How many qualities Krishna has? Unlimited. How many pastimes Krishna has? Unlimited. It's unlimited. Ananta Shesh is with his millions of hoods, is chanting the glories and names of the Lord and still cannot get to even a fraction of the total. Krishna has unlimited number of names. And what is the special potency of these names? Nidya Sarva Shaktis Tatrarpita. Sarva Shakti. All the Shakti. In them, you have invested all your transcendental energies. What does this mean? Krishna is then non-different from his names. Right? Just trying for us to understand that. Is this you? This cover? Why? It's dull matter. Right? But if this lid had all of your potencies, it could talk, it could walk, it could eat, it could give humor, it could go and program a computer, and all your energies and potencies. Then, non-different from you. Yeah. Is it not? If it had all your, even if it had your potency of appearance, it's not different. Right? Krishna has put all of his energies. What is Krishna? It's a composition of all of his potencies, his energies. So if they are all present in his names, then they are non-different. We struggle to understand that because in this cup is some water. I am thirsty. If I chant water, 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 will I be nourished? Why? Because within the name of water, there is no potency of liquid, of taste, of nourishment. Those potencies that are not present in the name water. In the substance, water is there. So there is a difference between the substance and the name. How many of us want to meet Krishna? How many of us want to meet Krishna right now? Chant Krishna.
Krishna.
You just met Krishna. Why? Nijya Sarva Shaktis. We don't see it because of the dust in the heart.
Yeah.
But it is there. Because he is non-different from his holy names. Why? Because of this statement. Because all potency of Krishna is within the names. If all the potency of water was in the name water, they would not need to drink. That is the difference. Understand? So this is the supreme position of the holy names. Is he has invested all of his energies. And this is why we know not only in his names, in his books, in the deity form, they're all present. But specifically here, we can interact with the Supreme Lord. And when we chant, Krishna is actually dancing on our tongue. Because when you say Krishna, where it originates from? The tongue. With the word Krishna is not, it's dancing on our tongue. And when you see Krishna dancing on your tongue, then the ruchi will be experienced. And when you see once, you'll want to see again and again and again. And when you'll stop chanting? Never. Not only after you finish your 16 rounds. Okay. No. It is so sweet. It's non-different than his holy name. Nijya Sarva Shaktis. Most amazing potency. Niyamata Smaraneya Kala. How merciful Mahavadanaya Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is. No rules. Anytime, any place. Just chant the holy names of the Lord. It is the prime benediction. And now Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, okay, don't worry, no regulations, no rules. Just chant. No prerequisites, qualifications. Just chant. Anytime, any place. Anybody can chant. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was taught this himself in one sweet pastime with the sweet Gopal Guru. Once Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had went to the washroom, transcendentally. So he was addicted to chanting. So he was biting his finger. So he would not chant, thinking, oh, I should not chant in a dirty place. And so when he came out, the little boy, Gopal said, why are you biting your finger? And I was there, I was so attached to chanting, I didn't want to chant. And don't you know, you can chant anywhere, anytime, any place. And Chaitanya, yes, you are right. He said, you are my guru now. So they called him Gopal Guru. Of course, he's showing his teachings through his own actions. But this is no hard and fast rules. And what could be more merciful? Doesn't matter where we are. And so the fourth part, Etadasi Tava Kripa Bhagavan Mama Pi. That we are so unqualified, made this special arrangement. What happened? How great is your mercy? Is it so easy? Easily approach you by the chanting of your holy names. What could be more merciful? Nothing else is required. How much education it requires to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,
Hare
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 Rama,
Hare
Rama,
Rama 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 Hare Hare.
You can be completely illiterate. We can be completely blind, completely deaf, lame. Doesn't matter. One can take to the perfection of all processes, chanting of the holy names. What could be more merciful? It's made it accessible to everyone. Nobody is left behind. This great potent process is also available to everyone. The ultimate compassion of the Supreme Lord. The process is so easy. But, what is the problem? Durdaivam ijasa mahajarina anuraga. It should be the saddest realization for us. It should hit us in the heart like a thunderbolt. How I could not have attraction for this of all things, that which will give the prime benediction, that will extinguish all of my difficulties, that will give me an ever-increasing ocean of bliss, that will cleanse all of my anarthas. This, which there are no even hard and fast rules, which I can do anywhere, and yet I have no attraction for them. Is there any other greater misfortune? We define so many misfortunes. And we go to the Lord, if we are at least pious, and we give Him our whole list of misfortunes. That is our prayer. This misfortune after that misfortune. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tells us, yes, we have misfortune, but we only have one misfortune. This is our only real misfortune, Durdeva. Attraction for the holy names. So we should pray to Gauranga Mahaprabhu. Please, give me some attraction to chanting the holy names of the Lord. I see these 7 perfections, but it's not there. And Gauranga Mahaprabhu, being so magnanimous, so kind, will bestow his blessings to us. So, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains now why we have no attraction. We have no attraction. We may be chanting for years. Why is attraction? Because of Nama Aparad. The 10 offenses in chanting of the holy names. And I'll have to do a whole nother discussion to discuss the 10 offenses. But because of Nama Aparad, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, this attraction is not manifested. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, what to do then? He says, we should systematically analyze, very conscientiously, he says, where am I committing 1 of the 10 or 10 of the 10 or 6 of the 10 offenses in chanting of the holy names? And should concentrate on minimizing those offenses and chant and more. Coming from the Nama Bhasha stage, the offensive chanting, to the pure Suddhanama stage. Then the attraction will come. So this attraction comes from the awareness of the 10 offenses that we may be committing. So we should very diligently study and understand them, and then become free of them. And that is why, what do we chant immediately preceding our japa? The 10 offenses in the chanting of the holy names. Is there anything Srila Prabhupada did not give us? He's giving it to us in absolute perfection, step by step. And this is why we chant those 10 offenses. Sometimes we get through, just chant the Siksastakam, we chant the 10, so I can get to my rounds, I can finish them in time. No, we should meditate on the Siksastakam, on the 10 offenses, to solve this Durdevam, this misfortune, and understand this is our misfortune. Holy names are so powerful. And so we do this, then we'll find success. Okay? So this is verse 1 and 2 of the Siksastakam prayers. So tomorrow we will continue with verses 3, 4, and 5. And as we talked in the flow, now with this misfortune identified, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is going to say, Trinadapi Sunichena Tarodapi Shahishna Manina Manadena. Do these 4 things. And Kirtanaya Sadahari. How to chant constantly. Humble, tolerant, offering respects to all, expecting no respect in return. Do these things, and everything will become very perfect. Okay? Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai. Any questions, comments, discussion today?
Prabhu, when we explain on the end of Saturday, like Brahma Buddha, that and the difference between Brahma Buddha state and see, you told right, like calf's foot pudding, that's the Brahma Jyotis. So that difference between the two. I think Krishna says in 5.24 or 5.26 in Bhagavad Gita about Brahma Buddha state, right? So both are different or same?
Brahma Buddha means basically self-realization.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Realizing the self.
Yes.
So, yeah, we can talk a little bit about that. Because from that becomes mad bhaktim ladate param. This bhakti, one becomes qualified to devotional service. Self-realization means one thing: I am eternal servant of Krishna.
Krishna, yes.
That is self-realization.
Like I am not the body, I am the spirit soul, we are part and parcel of Krishna, and we are eternal servants of Krishna.
All three.
All three.
Knowing I am not this body, I am spirit soul is half the equation.
Yes.
I have to know then, okay, I am spirit soul, what is my soul?
Yeah.
Part and parcel of Krishna. That's close. Part and parcel means now my Sanatana Dharma serving Krishna.
Serving Krishna.
That is complete self-realization. That is knowing the passport inside and out.
So self-realization and Sanatana Dharma both are same?
No, Sanatana Dharma is the occupation one performs when they have self-realization.
Okay, it's the end result.
And think about it in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sambandha Abhideya Prayojana. Sambandha, realizing I am part and parcel of I am spirit soul.
Right.
By knowing that, there's only one Abhideya, devotional service, bhakti. And what is the most potent form of bhakti? So what is the most
Prema.
chanting?
Chanting.
Chanting. What Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was talking about in 8 verses?
Chanting.
He's not talking about 8 topics? How many topics? Chanting. Anything is missing from chanting? Anything is not included in chanting? Nothing? So I'll take to our chanting like this tomorrow? Supreme meditation. Anything else?
Eye-opener. Thank you so much.
Sadhana Bhakti setting stage of
Yes.
our prayer.
We are going to study in detail. We are going
Yes.
to study in detail. We are going to swimming in the
When was this spoken by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his life?
He spoke these verses in different times. Yeah, so they were not spoken in one setting, but in different times he spoke these and they were noted down. Like I said, Rupa Goswami compiled these verses in Padyavali, but even in Padyavali they don't appear in this order. And then Krishnas Kaviraj Goswami has compiled them in to this final 20th chapter of Chaitanya Charitamrita. That's how they came.
In one past time that he wrote some verses, and he store it and throw it in the river. Is that
No. He was reciting some verses,
Some
existing verses, yeah. So he would relish many verses, primarily from Srimad Bhagavatam. He would, relish some of the sweet verses. He would have Swarup Damodar, recite verses that would invoke some ecstatic feelings, Ramananda Rai, Nityananda Prabhu, things like that. And most of those were coming from, Srimad Bhagavatam, also Krishna Karnamrita, Ramana Thakur's Krishna Karnamrita. But these are the only 8 verses he composed. Anything else? Thank you very much again. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna.